Hello Hunters, I'm SurvivalVis, and welcome to our Light Bowgun tier list for monsterhunterrise. Now this is the kind of first time I'm doing something like this, and I mean with how tier lists usually seem to do pretty good on YouTube, and I'd like to grow the channel, I figured this was both a way of doing that and also talking about a topic I really do enjoy, which are the bowgun designs of Monster Hunter. So I went through in Rise, got a picture of every light bowgun, its base form, its long barrel form, and its silencer form. And we're going to look at ranking them in the tier list and go off of just kind of seeing where they all stack up with each other. There are three main criteria I'm sort of looking at to rate them at. I'm not going to use anything like, oh, point here, negative there, like add up a score total. It's all going to be my own personal opinion on how designs look to me, and how they kind of fit and where I feel like they should kind of stack up to each other. So, the first point, or the first bit of criteria I'm using is, how nice of a design is it actually? Like, is it a nice looking bowgun? Can you tell it is a bowgun? Do you see bow and gun in it, or do you see, like, what its main sort of leaning is? What I mean by that is, light bowguns kind of have these three subcategories their design seems to fit to, in my opinion. The first one is that they're a vertical style light bowgun, such as the Anjanath light bowgun here. You can see where the bow limbs are vertical on it. There's horizontal, which is like, let me find one. Gauss Rags right here, where it's more like a crossbow-esque style. And then there's the firearm style, which is something more like the... I guess the Almudrons would kind of be it, but think more like Zenogres, where it looks like kind of like a gun style. Those are the three main categories I kind of see for light bowguns fitting into. So if it's a nice looking one of a category and really stands out as you know what it is, it's going to be pretty good in that criteria. The second bit of criteria is, how well does it fit the monster it comes from? Like, how much does the design fit to the monster it is part of? Like, Anjanath's is another good example to show off, which, I mean, it'll be talked about more detail later, but you can see that's clearly from Anjanath, and it kind of sizes up and matches well to that design there. And then the last third, like the third bit of criteria, and the final one I'm kind of looking at is, how well does it fit the monster's theme? Like, does it feel like it is a bowgun that does belong from this monster, or does it feel like it doesn't really fit at all? Is it something that's way too alien or weird or not? Like, it just feels weird to come from that monster. It's kind of close to the second criteria, I will admit, but there is a bit of a difference too there, and as we go through, it'll probably stand out a bit more what that difference is. So, as you also saw from the little scroll down, I'll go back again, we have a lot of looks to go through, because it was very tedious getting all of this stuff set up to use in the tier list, but thankfully, it's all here, all done, and I will go right into things. So to start us off, we are going into the Almudron light bowguns. And for these ones, I'm probably going to rank it as a B tier. Now my problem with Almudron, first of all, it's kind of hard to even tell what weapon type it is, because it's almost like a weird arm cannon look. And it's something that looks a bit too modern and almost foreign to Monster Hunter as a series. The entire Almudron weapon and armor stuff is meant to be like this futuristic mech almost stuff, but to me, it doesn't really fit well with Monster Hunter in general. It doesn't kind of have that feeling that it is Monster Hunter stuff. Now you could kind of argue this has been something we've seen in the past with some other sets, but even then they still kind of felt a bit more grounded to the series. Like the Celtis Queen and Celtis Armor was one like that, where the armor was trying to replicate a more mech style look, but you still had enough there that you knew, okay, this was actually from this monster, because you could see the colors and almost like the shell parts to the armor sets, or even the weapons. Here, though, you don't really get Almudron at all as a monster from the bowgun, or from the looks here. Unless you knew about the armor and the other weapons, you really wouldn't be able to associate this with any of the Monster Hunter monsters. So that's why I'm going to put it at B tier. Actually, I'm even going to move it down to C tier, because again, it just feels a bit too out there, even for Monster Hunter. But talking about something that is much more Monster Hunter is the Anjanath light bowgun. I'm going to put the all three up into A tier. Now this one actually is a very close contender for S tier, but it is missing something, and it is kind of easy to see what that is. So, the Anjanath Light Bowguns were introduced in World and Iceborne. Well, I guess just technically World, but it came also with the slap-on weapons as, I think, a good term to fit how Monster Hunter kind of took the designs for for World and Iceborne. But Light Bowguns are one weapon class you could almost get away with it. There's only a few things you have to do, and it's three main parts. Number one, you disguise the stock, so you don't see it at all in there, which the Anjanath Light Bowgun does very well because of the big bushy, almost like tail. Two, is you try to break up the limb look for like the bowgun. So you can see the bowgun limbs on this particular design are almost hidden in that set of like skeletal jaws, which is perfect for hiding it. And the third point, which is where the bowgun lost the S tier, is that the silencer and the power barrel have unique, or they aren't so bland looking, or they aren't so just generic looking. The little cylinder and then the long cylinder, I'm afraid, are just too bland and don't really add anything more to the bowgun's base design. So something that's going to take away from it, from being able to get up that high. Moving on to our next trio, though, is the Barioth. And these ones, I think I'd actually put the long barrel for Barioth into S tier. It's going to be our first S tier. And then I think I'll put the other two into A tier. Now, the reason why this is our S tier is because it fits all the criteria I mentioned very well. First of all, you can recognize this from Barioth. You have, that's the second tier, or second criteria. The first was that it is a good-looking bowgun design. You can see the bow limbs, the stock, everything about there, you know this is a light bowgun. The second criteria, which was, can you recognize the monster it came from? I think you can pretty easily. Like, even the bow limbs look like the little claws that jut off of Barioth's wings. The power barrel, you can see that it has the big orange saber teeth that Barioth has. Even the frame and the stock have those almost like segmented parts of it that Barioth's entire, like, I think the back and the tail both had that going along. Now, the other two, like the base one and the silencer, they aren't quite S tier because I feel like the base form, you can't really recognize it's Barioth. You might be able to pick it up, but it looks a bit too generic to really know for sure. And as for the silencer, it's kind of weird with having like the puffiness and then the fur behind it. It almost looks like you put a moth head or something onto the front end of the bowgun, so those two don't quite get up there, but I'll definitely put Barioth's Light Bowgun as an S tier because of how much it all like encompasses that. And moving along, we have another example of that. Barioth, with the silencer only, I put as an S tier. The rest, I would definitely go for A tier. The reason why the silencer is the one that gets S tier is because if you see this, you know it's Barioth's weapon. The big tube-like design of it. And the rest of the bowgun, even the base, like, without a long barrel or silencer, the base is kind of generic, so it is going to be a bit lower back. Although, looking at it, I might actually bring it up. No, I'm going to keep it in A tier. Because S tier, there's very few that are really going to be the full S tier, and it's probably going to be because they have that little addition to them. Or there's that little something just excels them, in my opinion. Barioth, you can see by all, like, the long tubing and just how sturdily built it looks. You can tell this is a Barioth weapon. Like, the long barrel I don't like as much because it's the weird bayonet swords that come out of it that just feel a bit weird. But that silencer, with the way it looks like a Barioth head you basically either screwed or jammed onto the end of your bowgun, that is an S tier without doubt. The next bowgun we're going to move into is going to be actually a new contender that, well, not too new of contender. He came with the title update 2 for Rise, and that was Basil. And he is another one who's going to fit into Anjanath's A tier. My reason here is, again, you can see much more evidently the stock and the power. Actually, you know what? I might even move that down a tier. B for Basil, I guess, but with having the stock so boring and bland, it just kind of stands out that it is a weapon that there could have been a little more to it. It could have looked more like Basil's tail for a stock, and again, because of how the power barrel and the silence are, it just feels like it's a little bit lacking in full feel or full kind of design to it. It's like little bits were done to it, but not the full thing. and that's where it's going to suffer a bit and land into B tier for me. Now, next up is going to be Bishotten, and this one I'm probably going to put into B tier as well. My reason being for this is that it doesn't really look like Bishotten in the weapon. This almost looks like some kind of fancy ore design or like a special bowgun you would get from unique parts. Like, it reminds me of the relic weapons, like the... I'm trying to remember what they were. Like the Lost Musket, although that might have been a heavy bowgun, actually. But either way, it doesn't look like it's actually from a monster itself to me. How ornate and gold and everything it is, it doesn't really come out as Bishotten to me. It comes out more as something from a different source. Now, for the looks-wise, it's not too bad. You have a rather beautiful flower arrangement sort of thing with, I mean, the weird stem or stalk in the middle. But it's... I am going to keep it as B tier just because it doesn't feel like it's from a monster, and that's one of the big things you want from your weapon, is a recognizable source of where it's from. That, unfortunately, though, doesn't really have it. So I'm going to keep it as B tier. I would rank it above the C tier because you can recognize it's a light bowgun still. You can recognize that from the bow limbs and kind of the base design. You know what it is. Next up is going to be the bone light bowgun, and this one is going to be an A tier. Now, there's not really... Actually, I'm going to put the power barrel a rank lower. And the reason for that is I don't like how big the stock actually, or the power barrel is on this light bowgun. Like, I think the base model is a fantastic and solid A tier, because that encompasses everything you want from a light bowgun for looks. You can see every part of it, you can see the bow limbs, I mean, it has the vertical thing, that's kind of my big thing for light bowguns. But my issue with the power barrel on this one is it feels like it's way too long. I think it's actually as long as the weapon is itself. Like, even the icon that you see on screen right now, it's cut off at the very tip here, so measuring that up from about where the bow, where it kind of stops between the images, I think that's about as long as the weapon, and that's not good in my opinion. I think if it was actually cut back a bit, and it was just a little bit longer, like say actually maybe even just like cut the barrels right back to where it sort of stops here for the stock attachment, and only like have them a little bit off from that, I think I would like it a lot better, and I would keep that as an A tier. But it just looks a bit too ridiculous to have it so long for what the base frame of it is. Moving on, we have the Camellius light bowgun, and I'm probably going to get some people who disagree, but I'm going to put this one as another C tier. To me, I don't recognize Camellios all that much through it. You might pick up the hints if you look really closely and see that it has like almost like the skin texture for Camellios' gear, and maybe the tail, but I feel like it's not curled enough to recognize it as a chameleon tail. How it kind of fits to Camellios' theming? I mean, it's kind of like a genie lamp in my opinion for its main look, or it's a lamp in my opinion, but it doesn't really stand out to me that as fitting to Camellios. The heavy bowgun that you get for Camellios definitely does, and I thought they would have tried to do almost like maybe like a poison needle thrower, or like a crossbow just shooting out poison darts, but I really don't think the lamp does anything to help with Camellios there. It doesn't really add to that feeling, and it's kind of hard to even pick out that's his weapon. So I'm going to keep that one as a C tier with Almudron. It's the ones where they're kind of more out there and alien that I really put here. Next one, though, is going to be Kushala Deora. And this one I'm actually going to put at D. The reason being, it both is not really recognizable as a bowgun, it doesn't really fit the monster it comes from, and the only way that you can kind of tell it's from Kushala is because of like the metally texture. Now, Kushala's weapons are all kind of, I always thought it was almost like the astrology stuff, because you had things like the Sagittarius-looking bow, and I think the Greatsword is another like zodiac animal or astrology animal-like thing. Having a wasp or a hornet for Kushala Deora, I don't understand at all. It, to me, just seems really, really weird there. I don't know why that kind of lines up, and nothing really, to me, lends the two together. I think if there's a light bowgun I'd like to see completely redone, well, one of them I'd like to see completely redone. We might hit the other one in the video in a little bit. But this one I feel like is just way too off for Kushala Daora and doesn't connect to any of his theming whatsoever. It needs something that actually draws it back to Kushala in a way. So I'm going to keep in D tier, not really one of the better designs, and it's one I really wish the series would have revamped going forward somewhere. Next up is actually a bit of a different one, because it's one of the novelty Light Bowguns, and I'm actually going to put this guy into C tier. He could probably fit down into D tier, but there is something a little funny and I do like about just using a fish for your Light Bowgun. There's nothing that looks like a Light Bowgun, it doesn't really fit a monster, it's just a little fun thing, but it's like, how much fun would you have just running around with a fish as your weapon? It kind of has a few little unique things, where the long barrel is like it's shooting a jet of water out. I think the silencer is the funnier bit, where it's just the open mouth of the fish, like, why am I doing this? What's happened to me? So it has a little bit of humor points. I'm going to put it in C tier. It's not a D, it's a little bit above. We move on to Gos Harag, who is going to be joining the A tier. Now, this is another one of the Light Bowguns that you can really recognize where it's from. Like, you can tell because of the way the bow limbs are, this is Gos Harag's for sure. It stands out because it fits with the weapon pretty well, and there's a lot of good theming there. The reason I don't put it into the S tier though, and it's probably more of a nitpick on my end, is just because of it being a horizontal bowgun. Yeah, I am going to... You know what, the more I look at it, I may actually bump up one of them to S tier, but I don't think I do the silencer, because, again, it's kind of weird you just stuck the mop end onto it. It doesn't feel like it really added anything there, and almost kind of looks too weird using the power barrel here, just because it's another one like it is, though. But, yeah, you know what, I'm going to keep it A tier. You should probably be able to recognize it is from Gos Harag. It is a rather good-looking design for a Light Bowgun. You can tell the stock, the frame, the limbs. You see it, you know it's a Light Bowgun. It's just that it does look a bit weird to me with how that middle is. It's kind of... I might actually move it up. Not that, like, it really matters too much from here. I'd probably put those two closer to S tier, and that one closer in just, like, solid A tier. Yes, yeah, I'll put it down here. I feel like if it was a vertical mounted, I would have liked it a lot more, but for what it is, I think it still holds its place pretty well. Next up, this is probably going to be the only Light Bowgun that's going to be in this tier, but to me, Ibushis are F tier for Light Bowguns. The reason being, all three, it's a complete strikeout of missing stuff. First of all, you cannot recognize it's a Light Bowgun. If you actually see it in-game, it looks like somebody took one of those airline traffic cushions, stuck it into a bag, and now you're just trying to squeeze it out like a whoopee cushion for what you're doing. It's a shame, too, because the ammo capacities are actually really nice to use. And, like, the only saving grace I have to the Ibushi Light Bowgun is that the long barrel and the silencer feel like they were part of a different bowgun, but then got transferred to this bowgun. Because it looks like there might have been something a lot better from them. The long barrel especially, and you might even be able to see, well, it's kind of hard to see because of how small it is in the tier maker, but the Ibushi Light Bowgun's long barrel also has, like, segmented scales on the ends, and then, like, the cloud texture you see up and down for almost like the railgun-esque look to it. I feel like those would have been much better, but the rest of the bowgun is absolute trash. You can't really recognize it's a Light Bowgun. You might be able to pick up it's from Ibushi, but I still feel like so much potential was cast aside for what we got that it does not make up for what we could have had with how nice and how cool of a monster Ibushi is, in my opinion. So that might be the only F-tier bowgun we have for Monster Hunter Rise. And I hope if we do get Rise on PC, somebody mods a much better looking bowgun for Ibushi, because it does not work. It does not work to me. So we're going to move on before I keep ranting on that subject to Izuchi's. And Izuchi's I'm going to probably put into the A tier. It's a very nice solid look that has all the features I really like in a light. Actually, you know what? I think I may move the base look into S tier. Now, my problem with the power barrel and the silencer is, again, the silencer is just one of those little generic cylinders on the front. And the long barrel is a bit too long. I feel like if it was shortened down so that way you could actually see the claw in the video that it tips off with, I would have that as an S tier. But for just the base look, I would put it as an S tier Light Bowgun. You can see exactly where it came from, you can tell it's Zuchi's. It fits so well with the monster and the theming of it, and you can really tell just it's a nice looking bowgun design. The 3 limbs really stand out as being good. It's just a very, very nice Light Bowgun look, so very few in the S tier right now, and it's hard to say if we'll see more of those there. Coming up next, we have the Gerardus, and to be honest, it's I think I'd probably put his base look as an A tier, but the 2 options are going to be C or B tiers. The reason being, I actually don't mind Gerardus' Light Bowgun look at all. It feels very fitting for the monster, and it is kind of one of the better Light Bowgun looks that came from World Iceborne. The big thing that it loses from again, though, is the bland power barrel and the bland silencer. There's just no flavor to them at the front end. They don't really feel like they're a unique look. They're just kind of the same thing carried along. Without them, though, it feels like it's much more contained and like a nicer design without them. So I'm going to keep it like that, where the base is an A tier, but the other 2 kind of suffer a bit. Now, this is an interesting one, because we have the base Kimura Light Bowgun. Like, this is the starting one. And to be honest, I think I'm going to put them all as A tier. Like, there's not really that much of a difference you can see between the long barrel and the silencer, but my issue with the Kimura is it feels like it's a bit too big for a nice design. Like, when you actually have this thing in-game, it looks huge. It is a very long thing. I'd probably say it's about as long as the Wyvern Chaser or this one right here. I think if it was a bit smaller of a model and it looked almost more like a contained matchlock rifle, or just like it wasn't quite as long as it is and felt a bit more contained in your hands, it would be a much better looking Light Bowgun, and I would probably boost the looks up to S tier. But it's just a little too big for its own good when you actually see it in game. The base model like this looks pretty good, but again, when you actually get to see what it's like in game, it's about as tall as you are. And it feels like that's a bit weird to have as a Light Bowgun, because the Light Bowguns are actually the one weapon I felt in Monster Hunter that can fit being a smaller look to them. Normally you have the big weapons like the Great Sword, the Lance, the Hammer, like the big meaty things. But certain weapons like the Sword and Shield, the Dual Blades, the Light Bowgun, they actually do better as smaller looks. You have the big, huge guys, and then you have the nicely contained little ones too. So, if it was a bit more smaller and a bit more contained, it would probably be higher up, but it still sits confidently in A tier. Now, we have an interesting one here, because next up are the Kezu Light Bowguns. And these ones, I'm probably going to put the power barrel and the silencer, I'll keep in A tier. You know, I'm going to put all 3 into A tier. It's just that the kind of hard to see what the bowgun, like the bow part of the bowgun is. This one is a horizontal style Light Bowgun, so it's a crossbow-esque, but to me, it just also seems a little bit out there for its look. Like, going off my points, I could argue it might be S tier, but I don't know. To me, just something doesn't quite line up with it enough as the other ones do. They are still some good looks, and they are very, very good designs for, like, Kezu weapons. I mean, it literally is holding a little Kezu. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to boost that up to S tier. I'm surprised I'm actually doing that, but that's probably my big thing that will get a weapon up to S tier, is if it's like you're using a small version of the monster as the weapon. Because if you have that as your weapon, you've completely encapsulated this is the monster, and this is where it's from. So surprisingly enough, Kezu's base Light Bowgun is going to join S tier. The power barrel and the silencer aren't going to, just because, I mean, it looks like you kind of transform it into a needle, and then you have like a little... That's kind of fitting for the pandemic, because it's almost like a little mask in front of Kezu's face there, but yeah, we'll keep those there. Moving along, we have the Rathalos Light Bowguns, which are another addition to A tier. I think the reason why I wouldn't put them quite into S tier is just because there might not be enough, like, Rathalos to them. Like, for the silencer here, my problem is that it almost looks more like an eagle's beak than like a dragon's. face in a way, or like a wyvern's mouth in a way, which I think is what's trying to emulate there, but to me, I don't actually. Yeah, it doesn't quite have enough Rathalos in it to make me want to push it up to S tier. It reminds me a lot of like the Anjanath Light Bowgun, where again you have, I mean, you can still see the stock a little bit under there, but it still has enough there that you recognize it's from Rathalos, it fits him pretty good. It's not quite just up there with that little bit to fully encapsulate it. It'd be probably up with Goss Rag stuff, I would say. Yeah, it's going to be above Anjanath because the power barrel and the silencer are different than just the standard skinny pipe and the fat cylinder. So it's going to be up at A tier. It's another nice look, but it's not quite enough to boost up to S. Now we actually have a bit of a unique one, the Royal Ludroth Light Bowgun. Now, this one here is a bit of a tougher one to try to sort of like navigate and figure out what do I want to kind of put it into. I do have a lot of nostalgia for this look, so I think I'm probably going to keep that as an A tier. I'm going to actually put the base one and the silencer as A tier, but the power barrel I'm going to put into B. B for banana, because, I mean, to me, the power barrel on this thing makes it look like you're using the banana gun. So it's not quite up with the other looks of it, but with the little bipod and the legs that, or the little bipod and the silencer you get, and just the base look itself, I feel are very good things that encapsulate Royal Ludroth as a monster. They're nothing super fancy, but they still stand out enough that it's a unique looking weapon, it's a rather nice contained design, and it really helps just add to, like, the light bowguns in general. Sorry about that, just really need a drink, because this is going to be a long one still. It just is a nice contained early light bowgun that really encapsulates what light bowgun looks and designs are. So you get a nice spot in A tier with a little bit into B there. Now, Magnum Hollows, I'm going to probably put the silencer in A tier, but I'm going to put the other looks into B tier. Now, my reasoning for this is that it's not really a bowgun. Like, if you were to turn that 90 degrees, you basically have a sword weapon model. The only way you really know it's a bowgun is with the silencer here, because you can kind of see it's, okay, sort of like a bladed barrel. When you have the long barrel and the base form, it, to me, doesn't really capture a bowgun look. It is a sword-looking weapon. Now, it's kind of disappointing that your weapon is not actually looking like the family it's supposed to be in. It's like having a hammer that looks more like a greatsword. Kind of interesting, but it feels like it's not right in the right spot. I almost feel like with the power barrel here, this could be a better gun last look than a light bowgun look. Now, I put this into the A tier because it does stand out more as like a firearm look to me, and I do like it more than the other two, so that's why I'll probably have some back and forth on, well, that shouldn't be that low, that's an A tier, come on. This is my opinions of it. I mean, you guys are probably going to have a completely different idea of what the lists are, what goes up, down, etc. But this is kind of where I sit it as. You want a weapon that actually looks like it is part of that family you're using. If I want a light bowgun, I kind of like to know and see a light bowgun. So we'll keep them there, and moving along we have Mizutsune's. And here, the base is definitely an A. I think the silencer is an A. Yeah, you know what, we'll put you into A tier as well. These are a nice firearm style look, and one of the interesting things is that it's kind of like a water pistol-esque in a way. Like, it looks like you pump it up from behind to apply pressure, like almost like a super soaker toy or something. But then it is fully encapsulated to really show off that Mizutsune is a water element monster, and I really do like that. I think the silencer is a nice deviation from, like, just the general sort of look we see to silencers. Well, I say that, although some are really unique silencers. I like almost like the red bandana tied to it that is a little nod to when Mizutsune goes enraged. It gets that red coloration. So I'm going to definitely keep those up into A tier. I'd probably move them around a bit, but how I kind of see it is all these are all A tiers. I'm not going to have, like, high and low to it, let's just keep them into their block divisions for now. And now we actually have a little bit of a fun one, and this one is going to go... I'm actually going to put this guy into B tier. He's a bit higher than the C tier was with the fish, and the reason being the Palamute Light Bowgun is just a really fun one to me for looks. Like, you can actually see there's a little bowstring for the tail that kind of keeps it with the rest of the look. And it's another one of those ones just funny, interesting to look at, and surprisingly, this one has a bit of utility if you want to be a support status gunner. I know this is more by design than their ammo capacities, but it's that you could actually potentially use this and show it off. Gives it a little bit more credit than I would give to, like, the fish bowgun. So it definitely has a solid B. Again, it's not quite a serious light bowgun look, it's more one of those, like, novelty and for fun ones. So I'm going to give it a nice little spot in B. That's a good doggo. Now, next we'll have the Nargacuga. And this is one where I think I would probably put the base and the silencer into A tier, but the power barrel I'm going to put into B tier. The reason being, Narga is like a stealthy, agile hunter, and that you can kind of pull off with just the base look and the almost like owl face that you put on the front as the silencer. But the long barrel makes it look like you're using a super big double shotgun in a way, which doesn't really fit to the theming of Nargacuga. You can see that it's almost like a mixed vertical horizontal light bowgun, because it's almost like a diagonal you have the limbs out at. The silencer, I think, does add more than the base look to it, but I still think Narga's could have been a bit more sleeker in a way. Maybe even if this was just like a single barrel weapon, it might be a little better in my opinion, but I mean, this is probably one that's going to have a bit more debate to it, so base and silencer I do enjoy the look of, but I feel like the long barrel being just like this super long double barrel-esque thing doesn't quite match up with Narga's sort of theming and feeling. And now, from Ibushi at the bottom here, we have Narwa's, and Narwa I'm actually going to put as a C tier. Now, it's much better than Ibushi's. I mean, granted though, that's not saying much from where Ibushi sits, but Narwa's is one that I would almost mistake for a hammer. Like, looking at its base weapon model, which is this one, to me, it looks more hammer-esque than a light bowgun. If you were to turn this, again, 90 degrees, you have an actual little stock. Well, the stock here looks more like where you would hold it as a hammer, then you have the big club-like top to it. And I think that's one of my problems with the Narwa thing more, is it's hard to see it's truly a bowgun. When you have the long barrel and the silencer attached, it does help, but I don't think enough. Like, the long barrel on here almost makes it look like a lance more because just how long it actually is as a weapon. But I think if they would have done something more where the stock I think is okay, but having it too club-like here is a bit of a doesn't work. I almost think if it was like a bow limb that had those like little electrodes on the front of it, and it is almost curved like a half moon in a way, it would probably be a bit better of a look to me. It's just too hammer looking for a light bowgun, in my opinion. So it's going to get C tier. It's definitely above Ibushi, but it's one that I do think could use some improvements. Now, this is one I'm actually going to put into D tier because I don't think this should be a light bowgun look. This is the ore tree, where it's like the big, long, super looking rifle thing that I always thought was actually going to be a heavy bowgun look. This actually got introduced in Monster Hunter 3 as the medium bowgun. Yeah, for you people, there's a medium bowgun? There was a medium bowgun class for the bowgun trees. What happened in Monster Hunter 3 or Tri is that you actually had a complete modular system for all bowguns, meaning there were 3 separate parts that actually made up your bowgun. There was the stock, the frame, and the barrel. And depending on how much each individual part weighed, would classify them into different things. If they were, I think it was 30 or under for their weight, it was a light bowgun. If they were 35 to 55, I think it was around there, they were a medium, and if they were 60 or above, they were a heavy bowgun. So this was actually a medium bowgun look. And then I guess when it came time for like Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, or maybe even Portable 3rd, they had to decide, okay, does this go in light or heavy? And for some reason, even though it looks really big, and you could kind of see a spot where it does fold up on itself, this got chosen as a light bowgun. So I think I would enjoy it more as a heavy bowgun than a light, and I'm going to keep it in D tier for that reason. We'll move on to our next one, which is going to be Rajang, and this one, I'm going to put you... These guys are going to go A tier, but I'm going to put the power barrel again into B. I think my biggest issue with the power barrel is if all you do is extend what's already there, it doesn't add more. It just makes the weapon seem weirdly long, in my opinion. Like, the silencer is just a little bit attached onto the Rajang look as a base, so there's not really that much there. But Rajang as a light bowgun is a very nice one. It fits the monster so well. This 3-barrel cannon strapped together, having like the almost golden tiger striping that Rajang's known for, is a great look for the weapon. I think the only way it really would be improved, and we've actually seen it, is when you have things like Furious Rajang, and they really bring out that coloration. I think that would be an S tier if we see it in Rise. Right now, though, I'm confident in keeping it in A tier, and yeah, if all you do is really extend the barrel and you don't really add anything new, I think I want to keep you just a tier below. Because it feels like there's potential that could have been there for something a bit different, but just wasn't really taken in. Okay, this is a bit of a tricky one to put in, because this is Rachna Kadachi's, and to be honest, it's not an A. I'm debating whether I should do a B or a C. I think what I'll do is I'll do it a B, and the reason being is because of the armor theming it has. Like, Rachna Kadachi's, all of its stuff is themed around this sort of like haunted mansion or haunted, rundown, forlorn sort of feeling to it. So that's why it looks like almost like a wall sconce lantern. It doesn't really look like a light bowgun, and it doesn't stand out as being that either. Like, with the silencer, it almost looks like you put a pandemic mask or like one of our recent additions to the wardrobe over it in order to have that. And then the other one, the power barrel, is just like a little stand it has as well, so it doesn't really look like a bowgun to me, and the only way you know it's from Rachna is because of how it fits up with the armor. It still does fit Monster Hunter to me in looks, which is why it's above the tier for Almudron, but it's one of those ones where it would have been a bit more interesting to see maybe like the webbing could have been used to drape from like the bow limbs to the bowgun, or just kind of capture a bit more to make it feel like that weapon than just you're using a lantern in a way. So I want to keep Rachna Kadaki at B tier. Now next up we actually have the Raytheon, and I'm going to put the Raytheon base one into A tier, but the power barrel and the silencer are going to be the tier below, because it's a really unique looking light bowgun frame. This is one that has actually, I think, been with the game ever since Raytheon's introduction in the first game. And I do like how it's this more bipod style-esque light bowgun. You can really see it if I don't have a way to really like blow up the image here. But it's a nice light bowgun look that hasn't really been like a lot of weapons have used, or a lot of other light bowguns have taken it as a base to have their own spin on it. So it keeps a nice unique light bowgun look that is very recognizable as this is a light bowgun. The reason the other two aren't up there is because, again, it's just a wide fat cylinder and a skinny rod for the power barrel. There's stuff that could have been a little bit more done to it, but just was left behind, and just feels generic compared to the base. Okay, we are getting through there, and this is another one that's basically going to be for the same reasons for Raytheon having it sitting, is the Remover shotgun. And this is actually another little nostalgia trip, because this was sort of like the general look for a lot of your early light bowguns if you played Monster Hunter, I think first, second, and yeah, just the first two gens. If you played Freedom Unite, you probably had about 3 to 4 looks that had a Gaiadrome one, a Velocidrome one, a Gendrome, and Iodrome. Because this was like your Raptor light bowgun. This was the look that you got for a lot of them. The only difference was when it came to like the coloration on the stock, it was actually the monster hide. So Velocidrome had a blue and red pattern, Gaiadrome had white and kind of lighter bluish, Gendrome was green and yellow, so it worked well for the weapon because it's a nice early introduction to the light bowguns. So it does have a soft spot in my heart, and I do like how it is like this shotgun bowgun look. I'm going to keep you confident at A, but your power barrel and your silencer are again a bit blandish. Like, the Iodrome actually had a really nice looking silencer to it. It actually is like an Iodrome press attached to the barrel, which I don't have a way to show you here, but if you ever look up, or you have like Freedom Unite or Generations Ultimate, and you can try to see what that looks like, it's a really cool way to do a silencer for a weapon. Next up is Basarios, and you are another A tier for your base look. And I'm actually going to keep your long barrel and your silencer up with you this time, because these are a bit better ways of doing the like the specialty add-ons, or they're a lot different customization-wise. Basarios' Light Bowgun is like a little grenade launcher. It has a short little stock, almost like a revolver cylinder that you have right in the middle there. You can kind of see it on this one. And the front is almost like a little Basarios head that is shooting out your bullets or your shots right from the center of it. Now, you kind of lose that when you attach one of the other two things, like the silencer or the power barrel, but because of the way that they're much more unique, it's not just a little cylinder, it's not just a long rod, it's actually like a barrel that's been reinforced with Basarios shell underneath it to form like that scoop look, and I mean, it's just a lot of rock shoved on the front of it, but it's different than just your regular silencer. So you guys are going to get confidently seated into A there, and we're actually into a nice surprise that came with monsterhunterrise. Teostra got a Light Bowgun look, and all three are an A tier to me. These are fantastic additions to the like arsenal that you get from taking down Teostra, and they fit him so well. You can recognize his Teostra weapon, probably because more of the theming of like the armor and the other weapons than just how it is on its own, but it is captured in a very nice way, and it does reflect Teostra because he is explosions galore. He is your Lord of Explosions, and having a big, beefy 4-barrel revolver like this almost is fantastic. Now, the silencer is almost like a little crown just kind of stuck onto the front end, which again adds to that Emperor or Regal-esque feeling that Teostra weapons have. But the power barrel is an extension of the barrels, and also a little extra cylinder, so it's better than Rajang's, where it was just like the extended part. This is a little extension and then some added thing to make it look like it has extra firepower. So yeah, I'm very, very happy to see Teostra finally getting a Light Bowgun, and it earns an A tier without doubt. We're actually close to the tail end now, and here's one where I'm probably going to have a lot more discussion to, but I would put Tigrex's into C tier. I'm debating whether I'd even put it down to D tier. The problem for me is it doesn't really like, a tank does reflect Tigrex in a way, but it's a bit too alien to Monster Hunter for me. I think what I would like to see done is, if you want to keep the sort of tank aesthetic, either make it an event weapon for like having go after a special supersized Tigrex, or maybe even take off the bottom part of the tank and more kind of expand on like just the turret and making it look like it's a very big barrel on it. Because like a tank just is so foreign and alien to Monster Hunter. It's like the Almudron here. It just doesn't quite feel like it's in the same universe, or the right universe, to really be shown off. I know a lot of people are very fond of the look, but to me, it just didn't feel like it sit right with Tigrex. I feel like it's a little too out there and doesn't quite capture him as nicely as it could, so I'm going to keep them there, and we're going to move on to the next one, which we actually have what might be our final addition to the S tier, the Erector with its silencer. The other two are definitely A tiers, but that silencer is special, because when you look at it, it's basically like you have a mini Erector you are using as your weapon, and just like the Kezu, that is an S tier because it perfectly encapsulates where it's from. You can tell it's made from Erector parts, it captures its Erector. It's actually probably one where, I doubt Ignactor would get a Light Bowgun look, but if you did, you might just only have to like expand the silencer a bit more on the top and bottom, but yeah, I really, really like the Erector look. It's kind of a horizontal bowgun. It's hard to tell in like this video and from the picture here, but there are actually little fins on the left and right side that are actually the bow limbs that when you reload, I think they'll poke out, and then when you're out of ammo, they'll line up and in. Overall though, I really like how it captured it, and it kind of makes me wish we had more weapons tied to small monsters. use these as your introductions to like the elements or statuses a bit more. Have a weak fire element, but that kind of lets you start getting into, okay, use this element against this kind of monster. And just kind of start you a little earlier into understanding the weaknesses of certain monsters and how to build your gear out in a way. And with that, we come down to our final one, which is going to be Zinogres. And Zinogre, I'm going to put into A tier. Now, it is a very recognizable look, and it's been with the monster ever since his introduction. I think the big thing that holds me back a bit is because it is a bit more blandish. Oh, excuse me. Jeez, I'm just drinking water on that. Okay, but yeah, to me, it's a little bit too bland for, like, getting an S tier look. I think it was the... Actually, it might even be just because it's not reloaded. I thought there was a version of Zinogres where you actually got a little bit of, like, the bright blue energy to it when you were using it. So it looked like it was a charged Zinogre weapon. I think if it had that, I would boost it up to S tier, but just because of how it's sitting here, it kind of feels like it should have just a little something more, doesn't it? It's still a great look in general, but I still think like it's just a little lacking to have S tier like the others. So there you have it. Out of, I think it was like 99 looks, we only have 5 of them being what I qualify as an S tier. Now, you guys will probably have your own sort of ideas and opinions on what should go where. So what I'll probably do is try to save this tier list to let you guys play around and experiment too. And if you guys have ones you want to post up with what you think they are for their rankings, feel free to in the comments below. Like I say, this is the stuff I like getting into and talking about, is just like going over designs, what I really like on some of them, where they're lacking, what ones need to be completely overhauled because these 3 are so awful, except for like those 2 with the little front end only. But yeah, it's a nice little way to go over like Rise's Light Bowgun looks. I used them throughout the series, so it's a nice little fun detour from the usual. The link for this will be in the description, so if you guys want to play around, feel free to, and do let me know your own rankings. And thank you guys very much for watching this episode. It's a bit of a long one, but it was quite a few things to go through for a tier list. Almost 100 pieces. So, thank you guys very much for watching, and until I see you all in the next video, please remember, as always, survivors and hunters, take care, stay alive, and happy hunting.